Genesis chapter 12, if you get your Bible, find Genesis, then find the number 12. That's a one, and I don't know why I'm still being patronizing, but just find that. And we're looking tonight at two different characters in the Old Testament. We're not going to kind of go into a crazy depth, but we're going to kind of look at the kind of big questions of faith that these two people have. We're looking at Abraham, and then we're looking at Moses. Two incredibly bearded characters. But we're going to look straight away, kind of dive in. You'll realize in your Bible that Abraham at this time isn't called Abraham, he's called Abram. And Sarah, his wife, isn't called Sarah, she's called like Sarah, Sarai. But I'm just going to call them Abraham and Sarah throughout, just because otherwise you might get slightly confused. So even when it says Abram, I'm going to be saying Abraham. Just if you think I can't read, then you're quite right. But at the same time, I'm just going to read it. Genesis chapter 12, first few verses. The Lord had said to Abraham, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing, and you will bless those who bless you. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. All people on earth will be blessed through you." So Abraham left as the Lord had told him, and Lot, as his son, went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he set out for Haran. He took his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, and his possessions, all his possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. So we have this mission that God starts to reveal to Abraham. But his main thing is, I will make you a great nation. And there's a real certainty in those words from God. He's like, I will make you a great nation. I will do this. You see, our God is always certain. He's not a God of maybes. Most of you know if I ever say maybe to an invite that you give me, it means I'm not coming. But God is not a God of maybes, as in like, oh, maybe I'll do that. Maybe, Abraham, I will make you into a great nation. No, he's like, I will do it. And then we read on, verse 10. Now, this is a bit where life goes a little bit weird for Abraham, and we'll see why. Now, there was a famine in the land, and Abraham went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarah, "I know what a beautiful woman you are." It's a great line, by the way, to a wife. "When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' Then they will kill me and let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you." Now, let's just pause there for a moment. Now, I've never been married, and there's only one married couple here in the room. But I suggest, if Tim, it's wonderful they're here tonight, if Tim goes to somewhere maybe as an equivalent of Egypt, somewhere that's quite maybe a dangerous land for someone to go into. I don't know, Ilfracombe, for example. When he goes into the center of Ilfracombe, and he takes Lisa with him, I don't know how Lisa would react if Tim's like, you know what, today when we go in, and we go into the Tesco's, I'm going to have to refer to you as my sister, okay? Because I don't want any trouble kicking off. Now, if I'm Sarah in this situation, I'd probably just slap him and be like, pull yourself together, man. Like, just say I'm your... If they try and kill you, be a man about it. But you cannot lie and say I'm your sister. However, he does this. And it goes a little bit wrong because Pharaoh is like, my word, she is beautiful. And then takes her as one of his wives, as many wives, and lets her live in his household. And then the problems start to come to him because God's like, this isn't good, this isn't right. And God starts to pour out these serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of what is happening. Abraham becomes rich at this point because Pharaoh's like, yeah, I'll give you all of this stuff because of your sister. This is wonderful. Abraham at this point must be like, hasn't gone the way I quite expected, but at least I'm rich with donkeys and stuff now. But it's a weird thing because we learn here Abraham is chosen by God to be a great nation, but Abraham is an idiot. You know, Abraham is a weak man. He's not perfect in any way. Let's be honest, he has issues saying this kind of thing. And so we read on. Let's skip over to Genesis 15 because we're going to kind of whistle through the story. Genesis 15, it says this. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abraham. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abraham said, O sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abraham said, you've given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him, this man will not be your heir, but a son coming from your own body will be your heir. He took him outside and said, look up the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. Abraham believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. You see, Abraham has these doubts of like, remember how old he is, by the way? 75. And he's thinking about having kids. Again, a Channel 5 program, isn't it? But you kind of have this thing of just, he's doubting God because he's going through his life. Years have passed and he's like, I still haven't got any kids. And then God does this wonderful thing that God often does with us. He doesn't really answer his question because he realizes his question is pretty stupid. He's like, Abraham, let's go outside for a moment. Look at the stars. Can you count them? No. Guess who put them in space? Me. Now trust me. It's essentially what God is saying. And Abraham, though, does start to have faith, and he continues to believe, and he has this faith. Now, chapter 16, there's a problem. Chapter 16 comes along, and I'm going to say it, as his wife starts to crumble here. Now, Sarah, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar, which I assume is a cool name back then. So she said to Abraham, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Again, you just be like, oh, what you're saying, love. However, Abraham, being a typical guy, agreed with what Sarah said. So after Abraham had been living in Canaan 10 years, so he's 85 at this point. Crazy. 85 years old. Sarah, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. You're just like, what are you doing? Why are you taking matters into your own hand? You see, actually, both Abraham and Sarah had big weaknesses. They try and help God, and it results in sin. And we see later on that actually it's not a good thing. This child, Ishmael, is born, and actually Sarah kind of goes on and she gets to a place where this child is born and she starts to get really angry and spiteful towards Hagar. And basically it says in verse 6 of chapter 16, Sarah ill-treated Hagar, so she fled from her. You see, Sarah, like a nasty side starts to come out of her life. And both of these people are sinful. There's these lies, this doubt of what God is going to do, this, I'll help God along, and the way they treat others isn't necessarily good either. Chapter 17 we're not going to read, but God confirms this covenant, this agreement, this contract between himself and Abraham and Sarah. And this is when he changes their names to Abraham and Sarah. Verse 15 of Genesis 17, God said to Abraham, As for Sarah, your wife, you are no longer called a Sarah, but your name will be Sarah. That's because of what I've been doing. That doesn't make sense, but it doesn't matter. I will bless her, and I will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her, so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, would a son be born to a man of 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? And Abraham said to God, if only Ishmael might live under your blessing. Then God said, yes, but your wife Sarah will bear a child, and you will give him the name Isaac. Stanhope. No, just Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him, an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. You see, God is saying, I will do it. Abraham is almost laughing at the fact, is like, this isn't going to happen, God. Have you seen how old I am? I mean, I don't want to go into the details, but having a child involves some sort of action. And at 100 years old, I don't know how he's doing it, but he's getting around still. And his wife is, how old, Sarah? Like well, I don't know, but at the age of 90. And God's like, I will do it. Stop doubting, I will do it. Chapter 18 comes along, and verse 10 in chapter 18. Then the Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already old and well advanced in years. We've established that, but they like to repeat it just to get the point across. And Sarah was past the age of childbearing. It's like you don't say. So Sarah laughed to herself, and she thought, they're both having a laugh now, after I am worn out and my master is old. By the way, worn out's a horrible term for a woman, isn't it? After I am worn out and my master is old, I will now have this pleasure. Then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I'm old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, I did not laugh. But he said, yes, you did. I love that last little phrase. So we have again this thing where they're just like, I don't know if it's going to happen. God's response to, I don't think it's going to happen is anything too hard for me? Is anything too hard for the Lord? You just have to skip over a couple of chapters, Genesis 21, first few verses. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the very time God had promised. Abraham gave him the name Isaac, Price, just Isaac, to the son Sarah bore him. You see, God does it. God says, I will do it, and God does it. But Abraham has in his head this ongoing battle. God has promised me something. I believe he's the worker of miracles, versus it's not going to happen. God is a worker of miracles, and I've seen him work, and I believe he's great. He's spoken to me. I know he's God, versus I don't think so. And, Abraham falls down on the side quite often of it won't happen. So God continually reminds him of his faithfulness, his goodness, and his promise. Have you ever had the similar battle in your mind? Of like, I believe God is the God that works miracles. But you also have in your mind, but it probably won't happen. You go and pray for somebody that, I don't know, that your prayer is basically, God, would you really meet with them right now? Or would you heal them? Or wherever it is. What's the battle going on in your mind? If you're anything like me, the battle quite often is, I believe you're a God that works miracles, but I don't know if it's going to happen. And maybe you ask God to bring salvation to somebody that you know, to a family member or a friend, and you pray it, and you're like, God, would you do this? And you're like, I believe you can do it, but I don't know if it's going to happen. Maybe you're like, oh, God, I want to see you move. But actually in your mind, you're a bit like, I believe he does move. He does stuff. But maybe he'll do it somewhere else and not here. You know, and when we doubt in this way, we're kind of doubting God. And we're doubting who he says he is and what his promises are. Let's move on, the next character. You need to turn to Exodus, and let's not worry about where Exodus is, because you should know where that is. You just turn over a few pages. And Moses is the guy we're going to be looking at in Exodus. Now, to fill you in on where we're up to, this is after Joseph, his Technicolor Dreamcoat and all that, woo, singing and dancing. That's not in the Bible, don't worry. But that's kind of happened, and basically the whole of Israel is in Egypt. The Israelites are in Egypt, but it's got to a place over years where they've become the slaves of Egypt. And because for some reason the Israelites breed like rabbits, like they're everywhere. There's babies popping out left, right, and center. The Egyptians are like, and the Pharaoh especially is like, there's a problem here. There's too many of them. We feel a bit threatened by them. So what we'll do, reasonable guy, he's like, we'll kill all the boys. So whenever a boy is born, we will kill him. Moses is born. And his mum has a brainwave and says, you know what? I'll stick him in a basket and put him in a river. Like, I'd be like, what the heck are you thinking? You might as well just get killed another way. But she's just like, I'll put him in a basket, I'll put him in the river, and we'll just see where he floats. So she does this. And the Lord's hand is on this because Pharaoh's daughter sees him and takes him. And he goes in and becomes a son of Pharaoh's daughter and lives a privileged lifestyle growing up in Pharaoh's household. He's a bit older, and one day he's just in Egypt, and he's walking around, but he sees an Egyptian person beating a Hebrew, an Israelite. He sees them beating them up, and he just has this rage within him. So he has so much rage that he actually ends up killing the Egyptian. People find out about this, so he flees, he runs away, and does what any reasonable person would do and becomes a shepherd. And chapter 3 is where we join the story. Moses is just looking after sheep. That's his life. He's lost his privileges. He was brought up in luxury, but he's not got that now. He's just looking after sheep. Moses, chapter 3, he's with his sheep. He's hanging out, and he's in the desert. And he sees a bush that is burning. You know this story, but some of the things we miss out and we don't quite understand. But he sees a bush that's burning, and he's like, okay, that's not strange in the desert. With the heat of the sun, bushes would burn. But he looks at it and is like, oh, it's just burning. He looks back a little while later, the bush is still burning. He's like, that's weird. He thinks, oh, maybe it's a bigger bush than it looks. And he's like, it's still going. How is it still burning? So he goes over to the bush. Take a closer look. When he gets there, the burning bush says his name. He gets there and it says, Moses, Moses. Now at that moment, if I'm Moses, I'm like, bush, you can't talk. I must be going insane. And you walk away and think, I've had too much sun. Moses says something that I probably wouldn't say in this situation. He's like, here I am. Which is, I think, is a strange response. But it's God that's speaking to him through the burning bush. Chapter 3, verse 5 of Exodus. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the Lord your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. So Moses is there, bush burning, says his name. He's like, here I am. Don't know why again, but he still says it. And then God's like, where you are is holy ground, Moses. Take your shoes off. And he's like, all right, I'll do that then. I'll kick them off. And then he's just like, all right. And then it's like, by the way, I'm God speaking to you. He's like, oh my goodness me. And I think he probably goes down on the ground. Don't know why I took my shoes off. I've done it now. But then he goes down on the ground. It's just like, oh no. He's probably laying face down on the ground thinking, this is God speaking to me. He says it's holy ground. I've taken my sandals off. I was supposed to be just looking after my sheep and the stupid bush. I shouldn't have gone over. But he's just like, okay, I'm here now. And then God starts to speak to him, and God's like, I've got a mission for you. I'm sending you as my messenger to bring the whole of the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. Now, poor Moses, because his response in verse 11 of chapter 3, Moses said to God, who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? See, the who am I is basically saying, I can't do that, God. I can't do it. Get someone else. Like, you must be mistaken, God, me for someone else. I know you're speaking to me through a burning bush and holy ground, and I'm on the floor and all this. And I mean, it's really hot, God. So maybe you've got it wrong because I'm not that person. Who am I to go and do this? You see, Moses has the dilemma, different to Abraham. The dilemma is, God can use me versus I can't do it. And I love verse 12. Because God does not give Moses a pep talk. He doesn't say, come on, Moses, I believe in you. Come on, Moses, believe in yourself. Moses, remember, you were brought up in privilege. You've got all the skills required, Moses. Just believe in yourself. I want you to say to yourself 3 times a day, Moses, you are capable. I want you to find a mirror. Don't know where you find a mirror in the desert, Moses. I want you to go to that mirror. I want you to look at yourself in the mirror and say, you're the man. And just keep doing that. And after a time, you'll suddenly get to a place where you'll feel that you're able to do this. In fact, God's like, I've just released a DVD series on self-actualization. You can realize your potential, Moses. I'll beam it down at some point like manna from heaven. You can do that. You can do it, Moses. God doesn't say any of that, funny enough. But he doesn't say any of that because God just says this response to who am I that I should go? God's response is, I will be with you. Poor Moses at this point, he's just like, oh, I didn't really ask that question. I'm like, who am I to go? And God's like, I'll be with you. That's enough. I'm all you need. Man, what a little lesson for us right there. Do you trust that God is all you need? When he asks you to do something and he says, I'll be with you. Is that enough for you? Verse 13, Moses starts to go into meltdown here because he says to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? He's trying to think of these excuses. He's like, oh, I don't even know your name. How can I possibly go on your behalf? Verse 14, God says to Moses, in response to, what's your name? His response is, I am. Moses, like at this point, must have been like, oh, it's been a really bad day. I was just looking after sheep, and then the stupid burning bush, I shouldn't have gone over to it, and now I've got my shoes off, and I'm down in the sand, and I've been given a mission that seems like I'm going to get killed straight. As soon as I walk in, I'm just going to get killed anyway, and now I'm given this mission, and I was saying, who's sending me? Which sort of God are you? And now he's just saying, I am, and Moses must have been like, you are... oh, give me something, God. And then God's like, okay, I'll give you some more. I'll give you all my whole name. It's like, my name is, I am who I am. Oh, Moses must have been like, oh, why are you speaking to me in riddles? I don't understand. And then he says, you ought to say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. You see, poor Moses. But what he's getting across, God, is this. If God is I am, it means that as human beings, for myself, it means that I am not. God is like, I am able. I am good. I am full of love. I am king. I am God. I am in charge. So that means for me, if I'm a servant of God and I'm looking to follow him, it means I am not good enough. I am not the savior of myself. I am not in charge. I am not able to do this without you, God. I'm not God. And then God goes on and tells Moses his plan. Chapter 4, we won't really read it, but Moses is still desperately thinking of excuses. First verse of chapter 4, Moses answered, what if they don't believe me or listen to me? And they say, the Lord did not appear to you. In other words, what if they didn't believe me, God? He still struggles to trust, believe, and he's making up these excuses now. But I want to encourage you. You cannot live your life with what ifs. You can't live your life in a state of thinking what if all the time. Because it's a rubbish way to live. It steals your joy. It means you don't do anything. It means you're unfulfilled. It means there's a lack of faith within our hearts. It means that we don't put God first in our lives because it's always about what if this? And what if this doesn't happen? What is this? And God's like, hello, I've told you, I'll be with you. Verse 10 to 17, like Moses comes up with a terrific excuse again, basically saying, I've got a speech impediment, God. Like I stutter like crazy, especially when I get nervous. And in front of Pharaoh, I think I might be nervous. So I still don't think I'm really the person to do this, God. Do you think like maybe you should change your mind? It says that God's anger burns against Moses. And I think it's because he's like, Moses, do you not get it? Aren't I enough for you? I've said I'll be with you. What more do you want? What more do you need? You don't need anything else. And you see, a famous saying goes, God doesn't call the equipped, but he equips the called. So God calls us first. And on the way, he equips us to do what he is calling us to do as we trust him. Much like we said last week with feeding the 5,000, as disciples had to walk around with these basketfuls of bread that they're thinking, I don't know if this is enough. They trust on the way, and God provides. And incidentally, in God releasing the Israelites from captivity, from slavery, God is keeping his covenant, this agreement, this contract, this promise with Abraham to make them into a great nation. He uses Moses in this miracle. So what do these mean for us? You know, you might follow Jesus. You might believe that he is the worker of miracles, and you're like, yes, he keeps his promises. But in your heart, you often come down on the side of, but it won't happen really, will it? Not here, not now, not with me. I'm going to be honest. I think in some ways it's a Devon thing within us that is always within us that lived here for a number of years. That's a bit like, oh yeah, I believe God will do these cool things, but I don't know if you'll do it here, because this is North Devon, it's pretty relaxed. I don't know if God's going to do it here. Like, if you still want to see God move, I don't know, maybe go to a big city, maybe travel to another part of the world, go to Toronto or something like that, go maybe even now to China or South Korea, and you'll see God doing these amazing things. But I don't know about Barnstable, I don't know about North Devon. And God tonight, I really believe, wants to remind you of his great power, his great faithfulness. What are the promises that God has spoken over your life? It may be between you and him, little ones that he's just, little promises that he's got in his word that's like, I'm never going to leave you. I'm never going to abandon you. I'm never going to stop loving you. My grace is always enough for you. They might be for another or for a situation that you've really heard God's promise over. And maybe for some of you, you believe, I believe he's going to do this. But over time, you've seen no change and you've seen no movement, and you're just like, maybe I'm wrong. To you, I believe God wants to say, is anything too hard for me? Is anything too hard for the Lord? Ask yourself, do you really believe that in your heart? Examine your heart. God might be even saying to you tonight, ask me to examine your heart and see if there is anything in there that doesn't believe is anything too hard for the Lord. Or maybe you're a follower of Jesus and you know God works miracles and you know he uses people amazingly and you know he can use people and you're just like, I don't know what God's calling is for me. For some of you, it may be something specific that God is calling you to do. You know on your heart, you're just like, this is what God has for me right now in my life. It might be to share my faith with one particular person, but I don't know and I haven't done it yet. It might be to be open the fact, like at school or college or with friends, that you have a faith. It might be to pray for somebody there and then. It might be to trust him. It might be to do something for him. It also might be to stop doing something. It might be to leave sin behind, to walk away from it. God might be calling you to that. If you haven't got anything specific, you're sat there, you're like, I don't know if God has called me to anything specific. Well, let me give you a helping hand, because the Bible is packed with non-specifics, but therefore all of us who believe. He says, go and make disciples. Not just someone who puts up their hand and say, yeah, I believe, but someone who says, yeah, I want to follow Jesus for the rest of my life. Like, work with them, help them. Maybe it's look after the poor, the broken, the oppressed. God tells us to do this in his word. Maybe it's serving people in your workplace. Whatever you do, do it in such a way as if you were working for the Lord himself. Maybe it's to show love to somebody. And God tends to reveal his heart to us more than give us specifics quite often. He's a little bit like my mum in that respect. My mum will, remember years ago, she would just walk into my room and she wouldn't ask me to do anything, but she'd reveal her heart. So she'd walk into my room and be like, oh, your room's dirty, and then leave again. But I know, because I translate that, I see her heart, your room is filthy, but really what she's kind of pushing me towards is, clean your room, you mongrel, or something like that. Or it might be, I've noticed my mum does this quite a lot with my dad recently as well. It's fantastic. She's just like, oh, I haven't had a cup of tea for ages. She doesn't ask him to have a cup of tea. She's revealing her heart that she loves tea. Or like, oh, I do love a warm drink, John. And then my dad's just like, okay. And literally doesn't even ask now. He just goes and does it, bless him. God is a bit like that. He reveals his heart to us. He's like, I want everyone to be saved. I want you to serve the broken, the oppressed, the poor. I want you to work with all your heart in whatever you do as if you're working for me. I want you to show my love. But for many of you, The reason we are not doing what God is calling us to do is because you sit here tonight and you, even right now, you're like, but I can't do those things, Paul. I can't do it. If you knew my life, my sin, my doubts, I can't do it. Let me say two things. Firstly, if you knew my sin, my doubts, and my life, you'd soon realize that yours isn't that bad. And secondly, remember Abraham? Remember Sarah? Did God use them mightily? Yes. Were they perfect? Were they good? I don't know if you've ever had a boyfriend or girlfriend and decided that you're going to call them your sister or your brother, but like, that's the level that Abraham's on. You know, I can't do it. But was it ever about you in the first place? Was it ever about how good you are? Was it ever about you? But actually our focus needs to be on him, because I can't, a lot of the time, is very true for us. I can't show God's love to everyone I meet. I'm not that loving a guy. You know, most of the time I see people and I hate them. So it's only God that can do a work through me. And God can do it. So to have the attitude, I can't do it, God, but you can. And I let you work in me and through me, God, by the power of your Spirit. You see, the problem is when the I can't stops you from doing something. To think I can't and be like, well, God's with me, so I'm doing it anyway, it's fine. But when you're like, I can't, and you're like, so I won't, is the problem. See, the I can't doesn't need to be a deal breaker. Because the I can't, God, but you can, because you are with me. In fact, from New Testament, we even know the beautiful truth that it's not just God with us, I will be with you, but God can say to you, I will be in you. Christ in you, the hope of glory. Not you and Christ, not Christ with you, Christ in you is the hope of glory. God's work powerfully within us. God can do immeasurably more. And you know, God tonight just wants to say, I'll be with you. No what ifs. I am is with you. And remember, I am the center. I am big enough. I'm strong enough. I'm loving enough. I'm God. I'm King. I'm Savior. I am enough for whatever I call you to.